Breathe, just breathe.
I've got you now. I won't let anything happen to you. We need to move.
At just 18, pregnant and abandoned by everyone she trusted, she had nowhere left to go until she met a lone mountain man whose actions would change her life forever. Snow drifted across the narrow dirt road as the wind howled through the valley. The world felt endless, cold, and merciless, and in the middle of that frozen silence walked a young girl named Ella. Her coat was thin, her shoes soaked, and her hands pressed tightly against her swollen belly. She was only 18, but the weight she carried, both in her womb and in her heart, was far heavier than her years. She had run away 3 months ago. Her parents had slammed the door in her face the night she told them she was pregnant. "You've shamed this family," her father had shouted, his voice full of disgust. The baby's father, a boy from the city, had promised love and forever, but forever had lasted exactly 1 week after she told him the truth. Now, with no home, no family, and no money, Ella wandered toward the only thing that didn't turn its back on her, the mountains. The last bus she could afford broke down near a forgotten town at the edge of the wilderness. That's where she found herself that morning, standing outside a small diner, shaking from hunger and exhaustion. Inside, the warmth and smell of coffee wrapped around her like a forgotten memory. The woman behind the counter, grey-haired and kind-eyed, looked up from her cleaning cloth. "You lost, sweetheart." Ella hesitated. "Just hungry and looking for work if anyone needs help," the woman frowned. "Work's hard to come by here, especially this time of year." She paused, studying the girl's pale face and trembling hands. "But there might be someone up in the mountains. Lives alone. Bit of a hermit, but he's got land, animals, and a cabin. Name's Jonas Hale. Folks say he sometimes needs help if you're brave enough to go up there." Ella's lips trembled. "Do you think he'd take me in?" The woman sighed. "Can't say. He's not much for company. But he's fair, and he's got a heart, even if he don't show it." That was enough for Ella. The woman gave her a small loaf of bread and pointed the way. The road wound through endless pine trees, the snow thickening with each step. Her feet went numb, and her vision blurred, but she didn't stop. Hours passed before she saw smoke rising from a cabin at the edge of a clearing. She hesitated, afraid of rejection again, but something in her told her to knock. The door creaked open. And there he stood, Jonas. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair tousled by the wind and eyes like winter itself, grey, steady and cold. His face was weathered, his hands rough from years of labor. "What are you doing up here?" he asked, voice deep and gruff. "I'm looking for work. Or shelter." "Just for a few days," she said, her voice cracking. He looked her over silently. His gaze paused on her belly. "You're pregnant." "Yes, 7 months." For a long moment he said nothing. The silence stretched so long, she thought he would close the door. But then he sighed, stepped aside and said, "Come in before you freeze to death." Inside was a small cabin with a stone fireplace glowing softly. The warmth hit her like sunlight. Jonas poured her a mug of water and handed her a blanket. "You can stay for the night," he said simply. "We'll see about tomorrow." That night, while he worked on repairing tools by the fire, Ella sat quietly, her hands resting on her belly. The baby kicked gently. She watched him in the flickering light, his strength, his quiet movements, his solitude. There was something broken in his eyes, something she recognized. When she whispered, "Thank you," he only nodded, not meeting her gaze. In the morning, Jonas cooked breakfast and handed her a plate. "You're weak," he said. "You need food." "I can work for it," she replied. He studied her a moment, then nodded. "Fine. You help with chores, you stay as long as it's needed. But I'm not running a charity." And so it began. Days turned into weeks. She cooked, cleaned, and tended to his small garden while he chopped wood and repaired fences. He rarely spoke more than a few words at a time, but little by little, the silence between them softened. She began to understand his rhythms, how he rose with the dawn, how he whistled softly to the animals, how he sometimes stood outside at night, staring into the distance as though haunted by something unseen. One evening, she asked quietly, "Why do you live up here all alone?" He didn't look at her, Because people break things they say they love. She didn't ask again, but she understood. Winter deepened, and with it came her pain. The contraction started early one night during a storm. Jonas was mending a window when he heard her cry out. He rushed to her side, panic flashing across his calm face. "What's happening?" "It's time," she gasped. He froze for a second, then sprang into action. He heated water, tore clean cloths, and did everything she told him to. The storm raged outside, the wind screaming through the trees. For hours, her cries echoed through the cabin. Jonas, who had once thought himself hardened by every pain in the world, felt his hands shake. And then, at dawn, silence. A small cry filled the room, a thin, beautiful sound of new life. Jonas stared in awe as Ella held the tiny baby girl in her arms. "Her name is Grace," she whispered through tears. Jonas's voice was rough. "Grace," he repeated softly. "That's a strong name." Outside, the storm broke, and sunlight spilled through the window. Inside, the world had changed forever. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow melted into small streams that wound through the valley, and the cabin filled with the sound of life again. Ella recovered quickly, and baby Grace grew strong. Jonas built a cradle by hand, carving tiny flowers into the wood. He said it was just something to keep busy, but Ella saw the truth in his eyes. He was growing attached. At first he tried to keep his distance, but Grace's laughter broke through the walls he had built. She would reach for his beard, giggling when he made a face, and he'd end up smiling despite himself. Ella watched them, her heart swelling. Jonas had once been a man who believed in nothing but survival. Years ago, he'd lost everything: a wife, a daughter, a life in the city. The pain had driven him into these mountains, where he thought he could bury himself in solitude. But now, with Ella and Grace in his cabin, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. One evening, as the sun set behind the peaks, Ella stood by the door, holding Grace. "You never told me what happened," she said softly. Jonas hesitated, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "They died. My wife and little girl. I thought if I came here I could stop feeling." Ella looked at him for a long moment. "And did it work?" He smiled sadly. "Not anymore." The months passed, and their small family found a rhythm. Ella cooked meals that filled the cabin with warmth. Jonas taught her how to split logs and catch fish in the nearby stream. Grace learned to crawl, her laughter echoing against the mountains. And in the quiet moments, when their eyes met, something deeper began to form, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than the past. But one morning, a letter arrived. A man from Ella's past had tracked her down, the baby's father. He wanted to see his child. Jonas watched her read the letter, her hands trembling. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "I don't know," she whispered. "Part of me wants him to see what he lost, but another part of me, I don't want Grace anywhere near him." Jonas looked at her, his voice steady. "You don't owe him anything, Ella. You built a life here, a real one." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You think I should stay?" He hesitated, then said softly, "I think you already have." That night, while Grace slept, Ella stepped outside and stood beneath the stars. Jonas joined her, silent beside her. The wind was gentle, the valley glowing with moonlight. She turned to him and said, "You saved us." He shook his head. "No, you saved me." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she reached for his hand. It was rough, warm, and real. Years passed, and the story of the mountain man and the girl he saved became a quiet legend whispered in nearby towns. People said they'd sometimes see smoke curling from the chimney at dusk, hear laughter carried by the wind. No one knew the full story, but everyone said that up in those mountains lived a family born from loss, love, and grace. And though Ella had once been a girl abandoned by the world, she grew into a woman who found everything she had ever needed in the heart of the man who had once chosen to live alone.